Have you ever really stopped to think about where monsters come from? And I don't mean, some spooky castle or a deep dark forest. I'm talking about the real source. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers and dissect the anatomy of a monster. And trust me, what we find might just surprise you. So, let's start with a big question.
Right, let's just put it out there. Where do they actually come from? The Wolfman, Dracula, every zombie you've ever seen. What's the blueprint? What's the common thread that ties together all the things that go bump in the night?
Well, here's the twist. The answer isn't somewhere out there. It's in here. The original monster, the one that all the others are based on, it lives inside the human mind. So to really understand any monster, we have to start by understanding ourselves. And to do that, we're going to turn to one of the first real explorers of the human psyche, Sigmund Freud. He basically drew a map of our inner world, and way down in the deepest, most uncharted territory, he found it. The birthplace of every single monster.
I want you to meet the id. In German, it literally just means the it. And that's perfect, because that's exactly what it is. It's this raw biological engine that just wants pleasure and survival. No rules, no thinking, no consequences. Seriously, think of a zombie. It wants brains. That's it. That is pure, unfiltered desire. That's the id.
But of course, we're not just a walking id, right? We've also got the ego, which is the I, the part of you that's trying to deal with the real world. And then there's the superego. You can think of that as the they. It's the voice of your parents, your teachers, society, all those rules and morals telling you what you should be doing. And your poor ego is just stuck right in the middle, playing referee between what you want and what you're told is right.
Freud had this fantastic analogy for it. He said the ego is like a rider on a horse, and the id is the horse. Now, the rider is supposed to be in control, right? But way too often, that horse is so powerful, so instinct-driven, that the rider is just hanging on for dear life, being dragged wherever that animal wants to go. And just to make things a little more chaotic, Freud said we're also being torn between two huge primal drives. First, there's Eros, the life drive. That's the part pushing us to survive, create, connect. But then there's Thanatos, the death drive. Yeah, Freud actually believed we have this quiet, unconscious pull towards self-destruction, this deep desire to just stop, to go back to the nothingness before life and escape all the struggle. So you've got this constant war between life and death raging inside you. We're all kind of a beautiful mess, aren't we?
Okay, so that's the monster inside of us. That's the psychological blueprint. But how does that inner it get out? How does it escape our minds and become the monsters we see in movies and books? Well, it turns out our culture is what gives it a body. And this idea is at the heart of a whole field of study called monster theory, which was really kicked off by a scholar named Jeffrey Jerome Cohen.
To really get this, let's look at the word itself. Monster actually comes from the Latin word monstrum, which means that which reveals or that which warns. And get this, it's the exact same root as our word demonstrate. So a monster isn't just there to freak us out. It's there to demonstrate something to us. It's trying to show us something important. And what are they showing us? They're showing us the cracks in our own society. See, monsters tend to be born out of cultural anxiety. Whenever there is some big stress on a society, a war, a plague, a huge scientific discovery that challenges everything we believe, that's when the monsters start crawling out of the woodwork. They are the symbols of our collective fears.
And this is really the core of monster theory. The idea is that a monster is a purely cultural creation. It's a symbol for everything that a society decides is different or the other. The monster stands on the edges of our maps, where it says, "Here be dragons," warning us not to go there. But, and this is the really interesting part, our fear of it is always mixed with a strange kind of desire.
Let's dig into that idea of the other for a second. This is so crucial. The monster is what happens when a culture takes all of its anxieties and fears about a certain group, the people who are not us, and it literally gives those fears a physical, monstrous body. It makes the abstract idea of the other into flesh and blood. You see this pattern everywhere throughout history and mythology. There's this incredible line in the Bible where spies go into a new, unknown land, and their fear literally transforms the people who live there into giants. They report back, to ourselves we seem like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. Fear doesn't just exaggerate things, it fundamentally changes what we see. It creates monsters out of people who are just different.
And this process has a very specific name. It's called scapegoating. It's this grimly efficient way for a society to take all of its own sins, its own internal problems, its own darkness, and project it all onto an outside group. By turning them into the monster, the society gets to feel pure and good again.
Okay, but that brings us to a really fascinating paradox. If monsters are just these walking, talking symbols of our deepest fears and cultural anxieties, why on earth do we love them so much? Why do we line up around the block for horror movies? What's that all about?
Well, the answer is that our fear is always tangled up with desire. We are absolutely terrified by the monster, for sure, but there's a little part of us that also envies its freedom. The monster doesn't have a superego telling it what to do. It gets to be pure id. It's free from all the rules of society, free from morality. And a part of us, the part that feels constrained by all those rules, finds that incredibly appealing.
All right, let's bring it all home. We've looked at the monster inside our own heads and the monster that our culture creates. So, when you put it all together, what does this whole process really, truly reveal about us? Here it is, the recipe for how to make a monster. Step 1, you start with the raw, primal, repressed energy of the human id. Step 2, you mix in a heavy dose of cultural anxiety, all those fears and cracks in society. Step 3, you project that whole toxic mess outward onto a person or a group, and bam, you've created a physical monster that serves as a container for all your inner and outer fears.
But here's the thing, no matter how many times we slay the dragon, no matter how many times we drive a stake through the vampire's heart, monsters always come back.
And they come back for one very simple, very profound reason. It's because they are us. They're not just some external threat. They are a fundamental, inseparable part of our own minds and our own cultures.
And that, in the end, is the monster's real job. They're a mirror. They reflect back at us everything we refuse to look at, everything we push down, everything we are terrified to see in our own reflection.
Which really leaves us with just one final, very personal question. We all have things we're scared of. We all have monsters that keep us up at night. So take a second and really think about it. What does your monster tell you about yourself?